Good morning, everyone. My name is Lorie Mills,
And I am Vickie Humphreys.
and we're going to do the Primo Perspective today. So, Vickie, it is so great to have you on the show.
You.
Everybody may be wondering, where's Kristen? So, this is Kristen's 40th birthday week, and she is on a cruise with her family. So, happy birthday, Kristen. We miss you, but we have Vickie, and she is going to be a fabulous guest. I'll give just a little bit of detail how Vickie's come to be on our show. So Kristen and I did a presentation or did a podcast, Vic, a few weeks ago about networking and bringing new grads into the system, into our career field, and how they're received, and the importance of networking. And so I thought it would be great to have you on to tell your story. I kind of told my side of the story on that podcast meeting you. And so I think it'd be great to hear from you. So I'm just going to kind of let you take it away, and I'll ask questions as we go, and we'll just talk.
Okay, great. And thank you for having me, by the way. So, my name is Vickie Humphreys. I have been in HIM since 2018. And just a little story of how I got started. Um, I, I feel like I entered the health information workforce a little bit later than some. So, when I was in my 20s, I was a stay at home mom. And my mother-in-law at the time, she was sick. She had several chronic illnesses that required her to see not only a primary care physician, but also several specialists. So I helped her a lot. I drove her to her appointments. I helped her manage the different physicians that she was seeing, as well as helping her manage her medications. One of her pain points as a patient was that she was on a limited fixed income. So if Medicare did not cover her medications, often she could not even get those medications filled. And she was also known for being very feisty. So when the pharmacist would say, Medicare is not covering this medication, she would get frustrated and sometimes argumentative with them. So I would need to kind of step in to diffuse the situation a bit. And one thing the pharmacist said to me quite often was, well, the code is not matching medical necessity. And the first time he said that, I said, okay, you're going to have to explain to me what that means. And he couldn't give me a clear answer at first, but I went home and I started researching on the internet. What do these codes mean, and what even is medical necessity? So, in what I learned through my research, I actually became an advocate for her of
Mhm.
sorts. So, I
That's
would bring
awesome.
her to her appointments, and I would be the one who would call her providers off to the side, and I would say, "Hey, you're changing this medication, you're prescribing this different one for her. I need you to make sure that the right code is attached to your prescription, because if it's not and Medicare doesn't cover it, she probably will not be able to get this medication."
Hmm.
And before long, her providers would call her cell phone and ask to talk to me. So,
Oh, wow. That's
and I did
crazy.
not realize at the time that you're really supposed to have a certification before you give clinicians advice on codes or documentation, but I didn't know that then. I was just trying to help them so that I could help my loved one get the health care and the medications that she needed. It wasn't until probably 10 years later that I realized that this was a part of a bigger industry known as health information management, and it could be a whole career path. So I
Wow.
found a program at my local college and I enrolled, and I've never looked back.
Oh, that is an amazing story. And it's such a great story from the fact that you're coming at it from the patient's perspective of how HIM people can help the patients and what we need to be doing. And that's one of the things I love about you is the research aspect of the way your mind works. I can say something because because we do a lot of work together, and I can say something, and then the next day Vickie is sending me all of this information of, oh, I did this research and I've got this information, and that is so fabulous. And a lot of HIM people do think that way. They want to know what's going on. That's kind of why I think we end up in the jobs we're in, is because we like problem solving and making sure it's all correct and the way it should be. So I think that's fantastic. So you went to school, and what school did you go to?
I went to Southwest Mississippi Community College in Summit, Mississippi.
Okay. Oh, yeah. I'm very familiar with Southwest. And actually, that's how you and I met. Is your class came to the health system I was working at. I was the director of coding in CDI, and I talked to you guys. And you really stuck out in my mind after that conversation. And I even talked to your teacher, and I was like, man, she's fabulous. Who knew, a year later you would be applying for a position as a coder at my hospital. And I will say, and if a lot of HIM directors don't think about this, taking a chance on students when they're fresh out of school, everybody wants somebody with experience, 3 years of experience and this and that and the other. And I always had the philosophy that I'd rather teach you my bad habits than have to break you of somebody else's. So yeah, we always would hire students. And so talk about that. You coming to work at Forest and as a student out of school.
Well, it opened up a whole new world for me, and I will always be forever grateful that you took a chance on me when I was still in school. And I felt like I knew a lot then, but I actually knew almost nothing. But I started out in clinic coding,
Hmm.
coding professional office visits. And again, I love school. I love learning, and that's one of my favorite things about health information is that the learning never really ends. The school continues even after graduation,
Oh
even
yes.
after certification. And
After
during my
30 years, it continues.
oh yes, absolutely. And I think one of the things that drove me is my tenacity to learn more
Hmm.
is the organization that you and I worked for at the time, they were growing and they
Hmm.
were taking on more specialties, including surgery. And so every time a new clinic came on board, I wanted to take it on.
Right.
And that's actually how I transitioned into education because Lori, I think you remember at one time I had taken on so much that you called me off to the side and you were like, "You cannot take on anymore. You cannot
Right.
do all of that by yourself."
Yeah. The one thing you may or may not know is when you got promoted and put in the education's part is because the two orthopedic trauma surgeons that had came on board was about to drive me insane. They are great, great guys, great physicians, but they always wanted to know every little piece of, well, why can't I code that way? Why can't I do this way? And as being a director of a 7 hospital system with 43 doctors' offices, I didn't have time to devote to those two that they needed. And so I was like, who can I get to take this project? Who can I get to do this? And I was like, okay, Vickie. Vickie is the person. So that's why I wrote the job description and had that education piece started, is because I knew you would be fabulous at it, but I needed somebody to take some of that pressure off of me that I could trust. And that was one thing that was very important to me. I knew you would always follow through. I wouldn't have to worry about you dropping the ball. And so that was one reason I elevated you, or promoted you into that position, because I needed someone I could trust to do that.
And that was actually one of my favorite spaces to work in because they challenged me.
Yes.
Those 2 physicians forced me to grow because they asked a lot of questions and they
Hmm.
really wanted to understand the why behind coding their services.
Hmm.
So in order for me to talk to them, I needed to know what I was talking about. So that was probably the time of my career where I experienced the largest growth.
Yeah, and that's always something that helps you grow is getting getting pushed out of your comfort zone. And I knew that that was, that was going to be outside of your comfort zone to start with, but I knew once you got in there, man, you were going to knock it out of the park and be fabulous. So talking about these two trauma physicians, tell us the story about how they took you to the coding symposium, the trauma symposium they went to, and your experience there, and what that was like.
So, are you talking about the orthopedic trauma conference?
Yes, yes, that's what I'm talking about. Yeah.
So, I was there in a room. There was a coding segment. I believe it was done by, oh my goodness, the name of the company escapes me. They are very well known though. I'll try to remember it later. But this was a coding, it was a 2-day coding session that was specifically geared toward physicians. This is what you do. This is how you report the services that you perform. And I did not realize when I was in that room that I was the only one that was in the audience who was not a physician. And so when it came time for questions and answers, I raised my hand and I had questions and I said, "Oh, so when I'm coding this, I do this, this, and this." And the presenter paused and she said, "Wait, you're a coder?" And everyone's eyes turned towards me and I was like, "Yes." But it was a wonderful experience, and I got to hear what it's like from their perspective,
Right.
how hard they work and the challenges that they face to not only report their services appropriately, but also document it the way they need to,
Right.
especially in the trauma space where time is of the essence.
Hmm. Yeah, and talking about being in a room full of physicians, it kind of had something similar that happened to me. Um, I got invited to Heart House in Washington D.C. for the American College of Cardiology. They were having a symposium about type 2 MIs and myocardial injuries. And so we're in this room. There's probably 40 something people in there. We're in this room, and I am one of three people who did not have a PhD or an MD behind their name in the room. And it was very intimidating to start with. But then, after having conversations and participating in discussions, the cardiologist who had actually got me invited texted me, and he said they are so impressed with you. So the doctors that knew him were texting him, telling him how impressed they were with my knowledge and my ideas on how myocardial injury should be coded. So it is intimidating to start with, but it's also very rewarding, and kind of a confidence builder. I mean, I'm sure it built your confidence to be in that room and be able to have a conversation and participate in the conversation that was happening.
Absolutely. During the break time, I was actually bombarded with several physicians who were like, "Oh, I didn't know you were a coder. Help me with this. How
Uh
do I
huh.
code this? How do I?"
Yeah.
So yeah, it was.
Yeah.
As far as the knowledge of the clinical side of things, I like to tell people I'm not a doctor. I just play one on TV.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, yeah. That's true. I mean, we do. We learn a lot of clinical background in our jobs, and it we have to know it in order to be able to do our jobs correctly. I think because I saw some of the stuff that the OB, oh my goodness, I don't even want to talk about OB. These ortho guys were doing, and they were basically creating new procedures. Some of the things they were doing, there were no CPT codes to describe what they were doing, and that's very hard because I can remember me and you sitting down with them and be like, okay, you got to explain this because it was some off the wall crazy stuff they were doing, but they were trying to put Humpty Dumpty back together again, and it was requiring these things to be done. So,
Oh, yes, absolutely, and you
yeah.
could tell that they really truly loved what they do.
Mhm.
One of them even, he was trying to explain to me a procedure that they had to do where they basically had to put a patient's foot back together, and he said, "You know what? Let me just go find the X-rays. Let me show you." And he was just showing me
Yeah.
the X-rays and explaining to me where he had to put the instrumentation to put this patient's foot
Mhm.
back together, and I was just amazed.
Oh, it's awesome. It's awesome. So I want to talk about networking a little bit because I know networking is very important to me, and you're getting out and starting to network more. So talk about networking in your career, and the things that you want to achieve by networking and how you're going to do that and that kind of thing.
Well, one of the things that I want to achieve is I'm gonna call it, overcoming the pandemic, because the pandemic did not do introverts any favors,
No.
and so now it's become to, so much easier to kind of be passive behind digital communication, sitting
Hmm.
behind a computer screen. So my goal is to reach out to others and make those human connections in person whenever possible. So, my mind went completely blank. I don't know where I
That
was
hey,
going with
look,
that
Kristen and
thought.
I do it all the time. We get it. So one thing, I know you have done a few presentations previously for meetings, but I know that you and Casey have submitted to a HEMA to present, and you've done some things for our state association, and now that you're with Primo, we're going to get you out in some other state associations as well. But talk about what that's like to for years you've listened to people present, but now you are the presenter. So talk about that. Talk about how it's made you feel. And
Well, it definitely pushes me out of my comfort zone, that is for sure, because I actually am quite shy, and I am more introverted and introspective, than I like to play on TV. So, I'm also kind of an over preparer. So, I will research, and I will make an agenda, and I will practice, and then I will get in front of a group of people, and I will forget the whole thing.
yeah,
One
we've
of my
talked about like how do you know how many slides to have to last for an hour? And I've been doing this a long time, so I know for myself I need between 25 and 32 slides to have an hour's presentation. And that leaves a few minutes for questions because I know that I tell a lot of stories in my presentations. So that eats up some of my time. And so I know recently you did a presentation for our Mississippi HIM show, and you thought you had enough slides and you didn't. And I'm going to tell kind of how networking played into being able to stretch that presentation, because there was a friend of mine that was on that webinar, and she has heard me talk about you, and so afterwards she asked all of these questions to kind of help get you over that finish line of having enough time to be able to award the CEU. So I think that's important too, that not only are we networking to acquire new acquaintances or to learn new information, we're networking to build that structure of people wanting you to do well, and people trying to help you do well, because Laura Little's who it was, and Laura, and that was
Yes.
one of the reasons she was so gung-ho to ask those questions, is she wanted you to do well, and she wanted to help you do that. And so that is very important, not only to me but her as well. So what was that like to have an expert in our state participate in your presentation with questions?
Well, I very much appreciate her saving my presentation, that's for sure. So, I when I finished the last slide and I got to the questions and answers, I looked down at the time and realized that I had only completed 32 minutes of my time slot. And I absolutely panicked. But then Miss Laura stepped in and she began asking me questions, and she started that conversation And
Mm-hmm.
we were able to just kind of continue on almost podcast style where you like
Right.
you and I are doing now, where you're just having that conversation. And when two people are talking, it often invites other people to, comment or join in. And it actually ended up, I feel like the second half of that presentation was better than the first half because it was that interaction going on.
Right, right. And I try to get people to do that. And even when I'm speaking in person, it is, trying to get audience participation. And sometimes I don't give the audience an option not to participate, because I have been known to just like get the microphone and walk around the room and call people by name and put the mic in their face and say, "Okay, what do you do about this situation?" So yeah, it's dangerous to be in my audiences, because I'm gonna require participation. But and not only that, so you're building this relationship in our industry to where you're becoming an industry expert. People reach out to you for your advice and your input on what we should be doing. How does that feel?
It feels surreal for one thing, because I don't know that I will ever reach a point where I fully feel like I am the expert. As far as I'm concerned, there's always something new to learn, especially in health information, because there's always updates, new policies, new rules. There's
Hmm.
always something more to learn. But one of the things that I lean on is the fact that I love learning and I love sharing what I've learned with others.
Hmm.
So I kind of carry that forward when others are reaching out to me as a subject matter expert. I if I don't know something, I'm going to tell you, you know what? I really don't know, but let me do some research and I will let you know what I find out.
Right, right. So, and I have a funny story. I always have a stories. And when Kristen and I do this together, I'm like, "Okay, I got a story." So I have a story. You know, it's even at 32 years in, and as many times as I have spoken at organizations and had people contact me for advice and things like that, I kind of, I forget sometimes that, yeah, I'm a subject matter expert. And a story of that, I had a vendor at one of my clients that was not performing like they should. They were underperforming and their coding was terrible. Um, and I made the comment on a call. I said, I don't pretend to be an expert. And then I thought about that as I was saying it. And I said, you know what? Yes, wait. I am an expert in this. I am a national expert in this. And what you're doing is not right. It is incorrect. I probably used a little more abrasive language than that, but I'm pretty sure I did. But it was like I wasn't wanting to accept that I am the expert, but I am an expert in coding. And so I was pointing that out to this vendor, that I know what I'm talking about. And I think sometimes in HIM, we have a tendency to stand off. We don't necessarily like to proclaim, "I am the expert in this and I know what I'm talking about." So do you see yourself getting there one day that you can say, "I am an expert and I can tell you about this"?
Lori, I have to say that you are probably my biggest inspiration for that.
Oh,
Your honesty
wow.
and straightforwardness has always been inspiring to me.
Well, thank you. And I will say this, my honesty sometimes does not always come across as professionally as it should. You've seen that. You worked for me. You've seen me, I won't say throw a temper tantrum, but you have seen me get upset and probably say some things that were not professional, but it happens to all of us. And, I will say my vendors have always told me they loved working for me because they always knew where they stood. Because I always told them, whether it was good, bad, or ugly, I always told you what I was thinking about your work. And I kind of feel that way. I did that with coders as well and CDIs. If you weren't doing a great job or you had some issues, I would tell you, and I would try to be very diplomatic. I've gotten more diplomatic in my old age. But yeah, I think it's very important that we're upfront honest with our new grads coming in and even our older people that's been there for a long time. just honesty and giving them the truth of what their performance is, I think is very helpful. What do you say? I mean, to be honest, so Vickie, I have to tell this. Vickie is known for building coding teams and helping, grow that talent that these new coders have. So let's talk about that, how important mentoring is to new grads and new professionals.
So again, like I said, I love learning and I love sharing what I've learned with others. And I tend to be a systems thinker. I like to work backwards. What is the goal? What actions are going to make that goal? And what are the smallest steps we can break it down to get there? And I love building relationships with new coders and new professionals because I remember how I felt when I first started and everything felt big and unknown to me. So
Right.
I love being able to talk with someone and have them understand that I know where they're coming from. And I think that's one of the refreshing things about the way you interact with others is it's very clear when you talk with you that you bring your heart into your profession.
Right.
And that's one of the things that I want to model when you bring your heart into it, when you're coaching others, mentoring and bringing them forward. My goal is to lift them up above me because
Right.
if they learn more than I know, then I know that I've done my part and helped them.
Yeah.
And
And
I have seen that. I have trained someone and it was actually in orthopedic trauma that I trained my replacement coder, so to speak. And now I will reach out to her and ask her questions because
right.
she has taken what she learned from me and has gone above and beyond since then.
Yep. And that's great when you see that. And that's kind of how I am about you. I mean, that's to me is so makes me so excited is, here you are. I saw that potential in you when you were in school. That day you were sitting in that conference room and asking questions. And I was like, man, this girl, she is awesome. So then when we were able to hire you, and I've seen you grow since 2018 and become this great subject matter expert. And, that's one reason I wanted to bring you over to Primo. It wasn't that First off, I'll say it wasn't that I was trying to retaliate or wanted to steal you from your current employer. It was that I saw your potential and I knew you were going to be amazing and that you could do so much. And that's why, we made you the job offer is because I knew you had the potential there that you're going to be unstoppable in this industry. And, I just knew you would make a great addition to the Primo team. And we, we find people like that throughout our industry. And that's why it's so important to network. Even if I had not have met you at our previous health system, I think getting to know you through our state association, would have recognized that drive in you and that ability and what you were going to do in our profession for the future. And I probably would have sought you out anyway, regardless that I knew you from a previous employer, because I see that in you. And I think that's why, even attending our state meetings in person is so important, is so that we can, identify that talent and use it to make our profession better.
And that's a very important point, especially in this changing age where, I'm probably more comfortable than I should be with more electronic forms of communication like text messaging and video calls. But that in-person interaction is so important. And if
Mhm.
I could share any advice with any new health information professionals listening to this episode, I would say get involved personally. Find your state association, find out when their meetings are, join conferences, shake hands with people, be curious
Right.
about what they do because you never know what avenues that could open up because health information is big. It's more than just coding. It's more
Mhm.
than just release of information. It's It's bigger than that. And in this changing landscape of healthcare right now, that human component is going to become even more important.
Yeah. Kristen laughs at me, and we talk about, so I do a lot of sales for Primo, and it's, if I can actually get a phone call with somebody or go meet them, I have we stand a better chance of getting a contract in place than just communicating via email. I need to
Mhm.
build that human relationship, and I think a lot of people are that way. They need to build that human relationship. We go to shows like HFMA shows, and I want to get to know the members. It's not always about making a sale. It's about being, building that relationship. I can remember, so one of my heroes in the industry has always been Bob Stewart and Terry Blunt from DocuVoice. They were two of my favorite people always. And Bob always was about, it's about the relationship. I may never do business with you, but I want to build that relationship with you. And that's how I kind of am. I may never get in your hospital or in your organization to do business, but I want to be friends. I want to be colleagues and peers, and I want to learn about you and your family and your organization, just so we can build that relationship. I think that's so important. Yeah, and we were talking as we got on the call, because the Hipcast hosts, Seth Johnston and Shannon Swafford, they're actually friends of ours. And, we've built that relationship. Now that we're friends, we started out, though, as peers in the industry. Seth and I met at Salt Lake City at an HIM, a HEMA show. And that was, he said, maybe 2008, 2009, and we have just developed this great friendship over the years, and that's so important. But I never would have met these people if I had not have been networking at these association shows. And I will say, Seth and I, we met at AHEMA, but we've been to a lot of Howl at the Moon, and I think we were at Gracie's dance party that night. We actually met and started to become friends. So it's very important to build those relationships.
You really do become almost like family over time.
Yeah, you do. You do. I mean, you work for me, but you are probably one of my closest friends, that we associate with, that I talk to the most, you and Kristen both. And I think it really shows what the relationships are like over the years in our profession, and how important it is to have those.
Absolutely, and I feel the same way about you, Lori.
Oh, well, thank you, Vic. Well, I guess we're kind of wrapping it up. We've talked about our networking and your experience, and my experience with you, and so I think we're at a really good stopping point for our Primo perspective today. So, do you have any last final words you want to give?
My biggest advice is don't feel like you have to know everything all at once because the learning never stops. Not just learning the processes and the workflows behind it, but learning the people because, especially in an age where AI and automation are becoming more and more prevalent and it's growing faster than we can possibly imagine, that human component, that insight in the collaboration in the teamwork that we have together is going to become even more important because at the end of the day, we do what we do for patients and the clinicians who take care of
Oh my goodness, all the words of wisdom. Thank
them.
you, Vickie, so much for being on the podcast with me this week while Kristen's off playing in the Caribbean. Wish I was playing in the Caribbean with her, but anyway,
Maybe we can all
thank
go on a trip
yeah,
together someday.
maybe so, maybe so. I think that would be a good Primo retreat. We could do a team building exercise. I think we'll have to tell her that when she gets back. But anyway, thank you for being on with me. And guys, if you got any questions or suggestions or anything you want to know, send us an email, contact us, and make some comments in the comment section on YouTube, or wherever you're listening to this podcast. We would love to connect with our audience. And you know what? Thank you guys, and we'll see you later.
Thank you. See you later.